Welcome to this Zoom webinar from December 18th, 2020. This was done live from American Beverage Depot in Miami, Florida, and participants included myself and Juan Pablo Garbin, the owner of the company, and there were several attendees from different places, including the Automation Academy. Hello and welcome to this webinar for 18th of December 2020. And I am here at American Beverage Depot near Miami, Florida. And I will be joined soon by Juan Pablo Garbin, one of the owners here, and we'll be talking about some of the projects that we've been doing here over the last 5 or 6 years. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here. As you can see, I've posted the website for American Beverage Depot. A little bit of information about ABD. This is directly from the website. American Beverage Depot is actually located in Medley, Florida, which is up near Hialeah, but is in the Miami metropolitan area. And this is directly from the website. American Beverage Depot has its roots in the Argentinian traditional bottling industry. Juan Pablo's father started the company in Argentina, and they bottled wine in addition to the juices and water and sodas that they bottle today. So you can see here they manufacture end product beverages in several different platforms. There are Tetra Pak bricks, which are basically the cartons of juice and cartons of basically anything, food products or whatever. And American Beverage Depot does have their own products, but they also co-pack for other companies. And you can see here they also do PET, which is polyethylene. I don't know what the actual acronym stands for, but it's basically the plastic bottles that you get your water in and soda pop and that sort of thing, all the way from smaller bottles, 16.9 ounce bottles, all the way up to 2-liter bottles. And I'll be showing some of the different pictures and things of some of those bottles and production going on in the plant. So I was introduced originally to Juan Pablo by Mike Henry of Automation Training. He's since retired, but Juan Pablo took a class from Mike Henry on Siemens, I believe. So he knew a little bit of Allen Bradley programming, but he wanted to learn some Siemens programming. So he took a class from Automation Training remotely, and Mike Henry was his teacher. And he asked Mike, just in passing, if Mike was available to maybe come down and do some work, because he knew that that Mike was a good Siemens programmer. Mike had a lot of experience in Siemens and Allen Bradley, in addition to teaching. But of course, Mike is from Canada, so it was difficult to come all the way down to Florida and do remote work and that sort of thing. So Mike referred me to Juan Pablo, and we talked on the phone. And I made my first trip to ABD in August of 2014. And my first trip was basically to debug some of the device net problems that they'd been having on their syrup line. So the syrup line, I'll show you some pictures of it in a little bit here, but basically it mixes the different syrup and flavorings and water and things that it takes to make sodas or juices or whatever. So let's see, looks like a couple people have shown up here. Hello, Carlos and Jet. I don't know if you can hear me, but I can't hear you either. So there we go, unmute everybody. There we go. So I was just going over some of the history that I have with ABD, and Juan Pablo will be joining us in a little bit. Can't hear you guys. Can you hear me? Oh, hold on. Let me make sure I'm not muted. That would be bad.
Yes.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
I can hear you.
Ah, that's good. Okay. So this is how I got started. I was explaining, I was introduced to Juan Pablo by Mike Henry when I was teaching back in 2014. Made my first trip in August 2014. It was really hot, and I was crawling under some of the different tanks and things and trying to figure out what was wrong with their device net system. It came down to basically, just over years. This was started in 2013. And over years of using DeviceNet, a lot of the connections had become corroded, so they moved some of the sensors to different points around the tanks, and then remapped them in the PLC program. So it got kind of complicated, and they needed a little bit of help. So I came down here, and at first I worked with their maintenance manager, Guillermo, and I worked with the plant manager, Luis, and kind of got to know them a little bit. And then over time, I met Juan Pablo, who is the son of the guy who started the company originally in Argentina and then built it here in Miami. So started making these trips and just debugging the syrup line, things like that. January, got into February, and then they kind of trusted me to help them put in a bunch of new tanks. So there were originally 4 syrup tanks, and they would mix batches of syrup for sodas and juices and things in those 4 tanks, and they needed more production capability, so they decided to put in 3 new tanks. So these tanks work in pairs, and I'm going to go ahead and slide down and show you a picture of the tanks. These are big tanks. They're about 9,000 gallons apiece, and they work in pairs. And the ones you see here are the original tanks, and then we added 2 tanks here, so another pair of tanks, and then there's like a 7th tank that's sort of for small batches and almost experimentation, and they haven't done a lot with that 7th tank yet, but these tanks work in pairs. So what they'll do is they'll fill one tank up, make a batch, and it will feed through the pasteurizers to the fillers. And then when this tank runs out, the other tank will take over. So it will start feeding the filler, and it just switches all the valving and things like that out. And this other pair of tanks, they can be using those, and it will it will create batches for a different filler. So they have 3 fillers and 3 pairs of tanks. And then they also have this PET bottling line. And the PET bottling line looks like, let's see if I can get a good picture of that. It starts out here with this bottle blower, right? So they'll blow these plastic bottles, and then here's a picture of some of the plastic bottles already filled by the water filler, and it's feeding out to a wrapper that, puts things into basically cartons, I guess you'd say. They're shrink wrapped packages, and then that's palletized in the palletizer at the end. So when I started out, again, for my first couple of years here, I really just worked with these tanks, design and startup for the new tanks. Show you some of the funny pictures we had. At the time, Luis is a mechanical engineer, and he's from Peru. And Luis was very good at hand drafting things, and they didn't have AutoCAD at the time. So he would hand draft all the tanks. These were the existing connections, and all the colors mean different things. There's in feeds and out feeds and things. And he would work with these hand drawings, and I would actually work with SCADA screens. So let's see if I can find the SCADA screens. Should be a picture of a couple of, yeah, here we go. So I had access to all these. So when I wanted to explain something to Luis, I would show him these SCADA screens, and I would say, okay, does this pipe go from here to here? And you can see it's kind of a diagram, and he would correct his drawings here. And this actually became probably an 8-foot by 6-foot bunch of papers all stuck together originally, and that's where the original design was done. Now they've since they've got a copy of AutoCAD, and they do a lot of this stuff, I guess, professionally now, but this was easier for him. So all the original design of all of the, let me show you one of these. These are the piping connections that you have to use to pump, you know, from one tank to maybe a different filler. You have to actually physically move these from one location. So you can see here it goes from the left to the right, and you can move these pipes, and it can go from the top to the bottom instead. So that's how you transfer juice from one tank to a different filler or whatever. This is a piece of the pasteurizer room that you see here. Here's another view of the pasteurizer room. So that's just a kind of an idea of how I got started here. As time moved on, I met Juan Pablo, and he started getting involved in the designing ignition, right? So we started collecting data from all the different PLCs in the plant. Juan Pablo came to Tennessee to work with me 1 week back in August, and the rest of the time I would come down for a week and 2 weeks over that time and work on different things. The shrink wrapper, grabbing data from the syrup room, which is the one that I added the tanks for, or the fillers. So over time, I've kind of gotten to know all the PLC and SCADA systems here. And whenever they need mostly PLC work, I come down here and I work on that end. And then Juan Pablo himself, who should be joining us, he hasn't shown up yet, but he does a lot of the ignition work. I've created some of his screens for him on ignition, and he said I could start ignition here on from my own tabletop. I may try to get that going here too. Let's see how that shows up. Let's see. Got a lot of screens. You guys can't see them here, but I'm dragging lots of, okay, I'll open Ignition Designer. We'll see if it opens here on the other screen. And while that's opening up, I'll show you a few more pictures. My wife actually came down and wired, this is a picture, she wired some of the panels, right? So this was actually in the filler area. So the area that I'm working on, one of the palletizers right now, this was all empty. And you can see her here building a control panel, which I think, Jet, I think you may do some of that. I don't know if you do panel building or some kind of maintenance work, but you can see she's used to mounting all these parts up, putting them on DIN rail, and then wiring them all up. By the time she got done, this was her again wiring here, and this was what the panel looked like, and it got stuck into this enclosure that you can see behind the panel itself. So this was right before we put it in, say in 20, let's see, when was it? Syrup line 2 weeks. So somewhere in here was when my wife actually came down, and I would actually teach classes in Orlando and then drive to Miami and do a week here and a week there on the startup. Let's see. So my ignition is opening. I'm typing in my password and username. We'll see how this works. And if Juan Pablo joins us later, he can correct me on what I'm doing. So Juan Pablo had to stay home, by the way. Let's see, plant ABD. Okay, this is opening up. I'll say open. He had to stay home today. We had a little kind of an emergency yesterday, and I think he's actually kind of isolating, self-isolating because of the COVID stuff. So of course we all wear masks here, but I think he may have gotten exposed to somebody whose wife tested positive and all that kind of stuff. So that's why he's staying home today. He was gonna kind of appear behind me at his own desk, and we were gonna go over this, but he's just gonna log in here when he gets a chance. Let's see, so I have ignition open. And we'll say next, you can drag all the pie, we'll close that. I'll show you what ignition looks like. This is ignition, and the PET window, let's see, main window, we'll open that up. So this is the designer, so this is not live at the moment, but I created these out of AutoCAD. Originally, I did these drawings in AutoCAD, and I'm going to show you another funny drawing here to show you how much work I have to do to create this kind of a screen. The original AutoCAD looks like this, right? And this is a plant drawing that they have that shows everything in the plant, and I have to convert the colors because you can see here there's like red and blue and all kinds of things. And personally, when I'm designing HMIs and things like that, I don't use red on any of the background things. So I have to convert all these. And to do that, you got to zoom in on it and edit it and do all kind of stuff to change all of these colors to what you want them to be. So this is the ignition screen, right? So let's see if I can make it maximize. I sort of need Juan Pablo's help on some of this. It's been a while since I've logged in, but that's what the, so if this tank is in use, right, it shows up as green. It's in process. So I don't know if there's a play button here or whatever, but yeah, I originally got to create these screens. Show you what these are. These are the 6 tanks that you saw before. There is the 7th tank. It's physically there, but we don't do anything with it. So I don't have an icon in here as to whether it's full or operating anything. Let's see. Let's see if I can just go back and open another screen. Welcome. Here's the PET line. So same thing. So where you saw those other drawings in AutoCAD, these are the things that I'm having to change the colors on. So they have recently added these big spiral conveyors. So the ones that you saw that were red are actually here now. So this big spiral is actually in the plant, and we're in the process of raising these conveyors up high so you can actually walk underneath them. It's the same palletizer, but the whole idea behind all of these modifications in this plant is to make, oh, there we go. So there's one, is to make the system more, it looks like he's coming in, Juan Pablo. And the idea is to make everything more efficient, right? So anytime you do these projects, the general idea is to improve production, make things produce faster, or create more space. So in the case of these spiral conveyors, by lifting this conveyor off the floor, you both can increase production and you can save some space because now you can put things underneath it. Juan, are you there? Unmute. So Juan, there's a mute button somewhere on your screen. I think on mine, for instance, it's up here. So if you unmute, I'll be able to hear you there. Can you hear me? Can anybody hear me?
Yes.
I can.
Okay, Carlos can hear me.
Yes.
There we go. Juan's there.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I hear everybody. Juan, can you hear me? I see that Juan's unmuted, but I can't hear him. Okay, well, Juan's here, but for whatever reason, I can't hear you, Juan. So moving along, if you do get your microphone working, Juan, just jump in anytime. But in any case, this is the AutoCAD drawing converted into a ignition screen. So that's the general idea behind it. And that takes a little bit extra work. So what I'm having to do right now is convert that into something that will have those spiral conveyors on here. And again, this is not running in real time. Juan could probably show me how to make that run. I'm in the designer portion here right now. So there's various different screens. And to run it, you can see all these up here, main window, JP, anything that has a JP, I know Juan Pablo's working in that. So I tend to stay a little bit out of it. But again, originally these screens came from taking an AutoCAD drawing, converting all the colors to nice background colors like black and blue, and then superimposing, let's see if I can show that again, superimposing things like circles, like on this main window, you see these circles are superimposed over it, and then they change colors based on the status of the tanks. So if they're operating, they would be green, that sort of thing. And we would do that for everything, right? So if there was, that's why I'm getting rid of the reds that you see on the AutoCAD drawings, because if there's a problem in one of these items, so the blower or this is a shrink wrapper, if there's a problem anywhere, what I want to do is make the red square or something appear over that icon and show you clearly, maybe make it blink and show that there's a problem there. And Juan Pablo eventually plans on putting some big screens in the plant where people can look up at the screen, and if they see red on the screen, then you know, okay, there's a problem there. So for reference, one of the reasons I came here this time is to work on this particular, actually it's not this palletizer, there is a third palletizer here. So there's actually 3 palletizers. That's one of the reasons I'm changing those AutoCAD drawings. And when that palletizer goes down, there's a stack light and it turns red and it makes a sound, but of course the plant's pretty loud, so you can't really hear the sound. And the operators or the maintenance guys can't always see that stack light from where they are at any given time. So if they see a big TV screen somewhere up at the top of the plant, right, then they can react to the fact that it turned red. So that's the idea behind it. So if you look at the layout of the plant now, this is a new drawing, there's that third palletizer. So Juan, I can see that you're unmuted, but for whatever reason, I can't hear you. Can you hear me? So just for all the rest of you guys, this is what I see. I can see everybody here. There's Jet, there's Carlos, there's Juan, and there's me. And I can see that he's unmuted, but I can't hear him. And I can hear the rest of you guys. So there's still something wrong on that end. A few more pictures here. Where are we at right now? This is December 2020. So these are the palletizer encoders I was talking about. And I think I have a nice picture of those. So that's kind of what I was here for. Well, let me bring up one more thing on the other screen while we're talking. I'll kind of show you what I was doing during this trip. Here we go, top tier. And I actually created a report, and this is to help some of the other guys, right? So I put the logo up here, things like that. I don't even think Juan Pablo's seen this much yet. Looks like Juan Pablo logged out. He may be signing back in and working with his microphone. This is a picture of, there we go, admit. He may even be switching computers. Okay, Juan.
Hello, Frank. Can you hear me?
Oh, now I hear you.
I am so sorry. Okay.
Okay.
Here we go.
Okay, so I'm just showing them. This is what we're currently working on, right? So this is the this is a picture of the palletizers, and it's mostly, we had it running for a while, but we had a problem yesterday. We did a switch over, and it had to power it down, power it back up, and it had a problem with one of the recipes. And so this report kind of tells everything about it, but we're back to running with these accel and decel flags. So this was mostly, again, PLC work, pretty straightforward, doesn't really connect with the ignition part. It's adding an encoder and a coupling, and of course, their maintenance people did all this, wired it in. We did a little bit of debug. Here's all the code. So I had to write, some of this code already existed. and I had to write some new code. This was, I don't know, Juan, what do you think? 3 days work? I think we did probably 3 solid days on it.
3 days work, and it was a little extra due to the counters from Alan Bradley.
That's right. Yes, we spent a full day debugging. The counters say that they have this thing called a soft preset, and it says, oh, you can change the soft preset anytime you want to. Just toggle this bit and throw the number in there. Well, it didn't work, and then we go online and we find lots of other people that said the exact same thing. Nope, didn't work, right? So we had to fight through a lot of that. But we did eventually get it working. We found this thing called a direct write, and we directly write the information into some registers. And this is basically, I just started out by creating a new routine for the encoders and playing around with them while they were actually running the machine. So, you know, some plants, you go work in pharmaceutical, you're not allowed to modify the machine while it's running. You know, it's all validated and things like that. But in automotive and in places like here, you can do that. Now, if you're going to do that, this would be a word to you, Jet, because I know you do a little bit of programming. You have to be super careful, because if you make one little mistake and, you know, throw the wrong number into the wrong register, the machine will shut down. And always make things reversible, right? You need to be able to get back up and running. You may have a plant manager standing behind you yelling, "We're losing $10,000 a minute. Are you done yet?" You know, that kind of thing. So,
yeah, I hear you.
so you got to be careful with this. This takes, I would say, you need those 5 years of experience maybe before you ever jump in and modify things while they're running, unless you know, you're real comfortable with the machine and the plant manager or the owner doesn't care. And Juan Pablo, he's a nice guy, so he forgives me if I do have any problems or anything. So Juan Pablo, I'm going to ask you a few questions. Are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me well?
I can hear you great. And
okay.
Let me see. I'm even going to drag your picture over here so everybody else can see it. If I wanted to, I could even make it bigger. So about the ignition projects, I was showing everybody the timeline, and it looks like we got started working together on that maybe 2016. Do you remember when you bought the original ignition package?
I bought probably ignition at the beginning of 2016. I bought it after, like I told you, when I tried to do the software with somebody else. They did and it was mostly that I wanted to do a shipping and receiving software. And when I found out that the limitations of doing something that they develop for you and not you developing yourself, it becomes a problem when you want to make it modular or adding things, you know, customizable. It's we had a simple problem. Our lines, we break cases in decimals. Most softwares, when you do, they make a part. They don't make the part in 1/3. So we needed to do that. So that was one of the mistake that the person did. And when I asked a change, of course, I want to charge more. And that's, you know, when I decided to try to do it myself. And I think you recommended Ignition, if I'm not mistaken. And then, you know, I went through their website, and after seeing the Inductive University, which is actually, I think, is their sale game, to be honest. After doing a couple, you know, courses in Inductive University, I started with Ignition.
Yeah, Ignition's awesome. And of course, I teach Wonderware. And Wonderware is just super expensive. And you talk about charging you for extra things. You know, you could be into $100,000 just putting your first, you know, and then they charge you more based on the number of tags. So if you want to monitor more points, they're going to charge you more. And, you know, you have to buy other packages and things like that. Whereas Ignition, from what I understand, it's one server's worth of tags, and it's unlimited tags, right?
It's unlimited per site. I mean, you could do, which I don't recommend, if you had 3 different plants, for example, you could use the same gateway for 3 different plants. But if you have an internet connection that it would go bad or something like that, you would lose connection between the plants. So I wouldn't recommend buying one license. We're not selling Ignition, of course, in here, but the good thing about Ignition is that you can try it for free for as long as you want. It's an unlimited trial that you only have to reset the trial every 2 hours. So for me, I think I bought it in the middle of maybe 2016 when we talked, but I started using it in the beginning of 2016. So for like 6 months, I just used a trial. You cannot put it on the plant floor, of course, but to develop and to learn, I think it was the best choice I could choose.
Yeah. And then we went through a period, I know there was probably a year after we did the original syrup line where I didn't come out here. We were done with syrup. We were talking about maybe doing some new projects, and I was busy teaching, flying all over the country and doing my thing. And then all of a sudden I came back, and I think you had maybe you had replaced the RSView 32, and we were running them side by side, which I think I have a good picture of it here. We were running the two of them side by side, and you had really advanced in ignition at that point, right? So you'd done these screens, and of course we still had problems with it because I don't remember exactly what the problems were, but I had done everything in the RSView 32, which is Alan Bradley's software, and updated it. But there were things that I think you were still working on here. So the poor old operators would have to use both screens, right? If something was down, they would go over to the other screen. And now, do they even use RS230 or RSView 32 anymore?
Well, like, some people in my plant don't like changes. So they want to go back to the old way, even though they have the new software. But yeah, sometimes they want to go back, and I give them the option. They work exactly the same. It's just I thought it was a better option because the RSView 32, since it's the old Windows, I have on a virtual machine. They have to log in. You have, I don't know, you can have more errors than. Plus, I was moving with ignition. That, in my opinion, to develop, as you know, with Alan Bradley, compared to how complicated, like the problem we had a problem a day and a half for the counter. Ignition in communication with Alan Bradley is perfect. You get tags very easy, and I don't think it's as useful. Not as useful, not as easy with Siemens or GE or other brands. But with Alan Bradley, you just get the tag straight on the system. You drag the tag into the window and you drop it. And if it's a temperature, you say, this is temperature, and you get the temperature reading right away. So it makes it simpler. Let's say for a less knowledgeable person, it makes it simpler to start.
What I find interesting is, of course, my background is using Wonderware and Alan Bradley stuff. And so I've always browsed for tags. And I tried to just browse and right click on things, and I couldn't find it. And then it was like, oh, well, you just drag it. You just have to get used to dragging it. So it's a different technique that you use to program this. And it is better to drag things, certainly. That's how I populated this PowerPoint, right? I just dragged the pictures in. It was a lot easier than going in and browsing for things, for sure. So yeah, same kind of thing for the tags. So let's see, another question. So the very first thing you did with ignition, you said was a palletizer.
The very first thing I did, it was going into the palletizer, connecting to the palletizer, because for me, it was always hard to connect Alan Bradley. When it was an Ethernet IP, it's a little easier, but everything else, DF1, RS, 485 is not as straightforward as you think. So the first thing I did was test this, and was actually one of the reasons I bought it. It was the easy way to connect. You don't need any knowledge or anything at all. You just need an IP. Technically, all you need is an IP, and then they do the rest for that. After that, connected to the palletizer, I started getting alarms from the palletizer. And the next thing I did after that was when I knew that it would work. Because in theory, what I wanted to do was in the future to integrate ignition with something else. That was actually the main goal. We were talking the other day, the new way is the Internet of Things. Right. to connect everything together. That we still don't know much about it, but the idea was to connect everything together. And when I saw that ignition could do that, that's when I decided to go that way, and I started learning. Little by little, to see what I needed to do. And that's what I think is good from their university, which is free, that you can get you have an idea of what you need to start with them. It's I didn't, well, you know me, I didn't know PLCs, anything actually, more what it was like 7-8 years ago, maybe.
Yep.
I didn't know anything at all. I didn't know what a PLC was actually. So it's not like I had a background all my life. So it's I have a perfect big toy that I can play all the time. So it's I have an advantage from everyone. But I had no knowledge, so it started from there.
Yep. So the interesting thing, I put this history together this morning, and like I said, I think I met Juan Pablo first somewhere in this time period, and Juan Pablo had just taken maybe his first PLC class at this point, and I got to give him some props because by about 2018 or so, he was quite adept and by far the best PLC programmer here in the plant. Now, during that time, he's had some guys that were pretty brilliant come through here. 2 of them are integrators now. They work for systems integration companies, and they kind of started out here. I think both of them are from Cuba.
Correct.
But they were, you know, again, very quick to learn stuff. And Juan Pablo himself has taken some of these programs from Seidel and from Tetra Pak, things like that, are very complicated programs. The one we're working with right now, it's a full palletizer from Top Tier. And, you know, he's comfortable now going into pretty much any Siemens or Allen Bradley program and, you know, modifying it and adding things to it, and it works. So it's kind of like he's been able to become an integrator. And sometimes I feel like you'd rather be an integrator than run a plant, right? And you do have, of course, help here. You got maintenance managers and plant managers and people here doing all that for you. But sometimes it is more fun. It can be very fun doing this, but it can also be very frustrating, as we found the other day. You know, full day just trying to figure out how to get numbers from encoders and change them in the card. The card worked the first time just about, but trying to change the numbers was the tough part.
But it is always more fun than sending emails. That's for sure. So.
That's true. That's true.
That's for sure.
So let's see. More questions about that. I kind of wrote down a few things about questions about ignition. So ignition itself, of course, has its methods of programming. Let's see if I can bring that up. Bring the ignition screen up. Got a lot of things up here. Where did it go? It's on the remote desktop. There we go. Somehow it got minimized. So there's, you know, all the different things that you can bring into ignition. It's very modular, right? You can build your own little modules for it. But then if you want to do further things, there are other languages involved. So for instance, Juan Pablo has a giant SQL database, and he populates that database and sticks all kinds of information in there. So all the batching information that we had from the syrup, right? That was one of the first things that we started collecting a lot of information. Since we had enlarged it and added these tanks, we had this information, and he started saving it into ignition. And then we tried to merge it with, right, the flow of the product goes from these tanks through these pasteurizers into these fillers, and then gets packaged into little boxes. And it also can go from these tanks into this filler, right? And then this blows bottles and it feeds bottles in here. So we want to know all that data. And when you do deal with all that data, you have to deal with other languages. So some of the languages that would be involved, you would have Java, right? It's based on Java, so everything kind of runs based on that. You have Python. Python is a good way to modify and write little code snippets. Potentially you have Visual Studio, and we've talked a little bit about that. You have, you know, C# or Visual Basic. And then you have SQL itself, which I've always been frustrated with SQL, trying to just set the databases up and do little queries and things like that. It's been hard for me. I'm much more of a PLC guy. But what is the best tool? If you had to learn one thing first in addition to inductive, university, and ignition, what would be the next thing you would want to learn?
If it's I mean, you cannot run ignition, and they say like on the first time that you log in on their website, you cannot run it if you have no idea in Python. You need at least a little idea in Python, which is something I didn't have, and it's easier to learn than most programs. They don't really call it Python; they call it Jython, because it's like an integration between Java and Python. Yeah. So they call Java libraries that they have integrated into their software. So they have like a system library that you call in Python, and then you access the Java from there. It's not, well, at least what I know, it's not that hard. You can advance. I mean, I do, kind of simple things. If you want to start creating functions and different, modules, that it's something, maybe for the end of the year that I want to learn, because it's once I know how to do simple things, do queries from there, or do like loops or jumping or breaks that you break from like, let's say we're creating a lot for the plant on the tanks. If you want to stop the load, you need the code to run the tag from ignition and say, okay, when you press this code, instead of doing this, you're going to go into the PLC, stop the tank, and say the tank is finished. So let's move into tank number 5. So it's not that complicated what they make you learn, but you still need some basic information in Jython. They have their whole library there, and the manual is very good, in my opinion. It's just very helpful.
Would somebody have a question or anything? I notice Itel Figueroa. So we have somebody else who's joined here also.
I am here.
Hey, how you doing?
You are good, and you?
Yeah, doing good.
Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you. So yeah, we're talking with Juan Pablo about the plant, mostly covering ignition,
Okay.
but also just the operation, right? If you look at this picture, for instance, there are, let's see, this is a big Siemens PLC. This is a 400. There are all kinds of different controllers in different places. And part of the purpose of all this ignition is to grab all that data from all those different PLCs with varying degrees of success. So for instance, yeah, we grabbed information from the syrup PLC early on. Now, Juan Pablo, was this the palletizer that you grabbed information from?
That's the first, yeah, that's the first machine. That's what we had with Cermex, and then one of the two guys that you described before, Daniel, he changed the palletizer to Allen Bradley, and then after that I decided to connect, and then that's when I started. So it's
okay. So you grabbed it out of the new Allen Bradley processor. I remember doing, I think, touch screens for this, and
correct.
Yeah. We've kind of done a variety of things on different machines in this plant. But now, yeah, all that information's obtained from here. We've done some work on this blower. This blower has a different problem. The original program, Seidel, is very proprietary, and they like to not give you a full copy of their program. So we have an uploaded copy of the program that has some comments and things in it, and we added an Ethernet card to it some years ago. And the goal is to grab all the information out of that blower, which is a very complicated machine, and populate that into ignition. So our current project, I showed some of the different projects that we've been working on. We're kind of done with a lot of the syrup stuff. Mm-hmm. We're still working on this area, but now we're moving into the PET lane. We want to grab production data so that we can make it more efficient in this area. But to do that, we need the information from this blower. And the goal is, one of the goals would be to grab it via that Ethernet card. And I haven't been here since we added that Ethernet card, but Juan Pablo, you tried to bring information out of that.
We did, and we were getting information is that I believe that since we didn't pass the information from the PLC to the PCI card that is on the S7400. I think on one of the shutdowns, it got the old program. So, rookie mistake from PLCs. But I think that's why, and now the car is not being recognized. So now that I have you here, probably tomorrow or Sunday, we're gonna do the redo a download and try with the Ethernet card again, because I think that's the problem. I mean, nothing failed. It's not that the car is faulty or anything. You know, we have our electronics guys to check anything that is faulty, so we know that it's not faulty. And it has to do with the programming. The problem with that is, as you know, is we had a hard time, again, connecting to the PLC through MPI. It's even though it should be simple, it wasn't, and that's mainly why you know that not only ignition, but you know me, I like to connect from my house, from IRB, from anywhere. It's the whole point, or you can connect anywhere you are. So the whole point is to connect everything to Ethernet, and then we can connect, you know, remotely to the plant. So we can check tags, fix anything from there. So that's the main goal.
Yeah, that's true. So that what may have happened is we think it loaded from the card.
Correct.
So the last time it came up, yeah, instead of loading changes we made.
Yeah, I didn't know if I had to do, but I'm guessing I did. I guess I had to do like a copy RAM to ROM. I'm not sure if that's the correct term or not, but I guess that's what I missed when I download the software. So. Okay,
yeah. So it does. That's the way Siemens works. A little different. Allen Bradley and Siemens both have very different ways of storing their programs. Allen Bradley, the card is optional, right? You can put it on the card, and we actually had a problem with that on the palletizer, right? Where we think that it probably grabbed the recipes from the card, which comes from Top Tier, and in the case of this, this big blower here, the information on the card is from Seidel. So if you want to change the information on the card, you have to explicitly say, I want to download this to the card instead of downloading it just to the operating memory, the working memory of the PLC. So a 300, you don't so much have to worry about that. When you download, you are downloading to, to the PLC, and then it writes automatically to the card. But I don't believe the 400 works exactly the same. So that's more research we'll have to do. We'll have to look and see what's different about the 400. And this is probably what, 2003 machine?
It's a 2003 machine, yes.
Yeah, so a 400, for those who are mostly familiar with Allen Bradley, is an extremely powerful PLC. It's the biggest and most powerful that Siemens makes. Usually you would use 300s, but 300s and 400s operate differently. You can have a PLC with multiple processors in the rack with a 400. You can't do that with a 300. So this is a big one. I remember some of the problems we've had in the past. That it has a big rotating head on it. Let me see if I got a picture of it. I think I got a picture of the rotating head, and up in the top of it, we actually, yeah, there's some of the rotating parts, right, inside of it. But up in the top of it, it actually had slip rings, and the Profibus was transferred over the slip rings. And I remember Guillermo or somebody getting up there and having to take things apart and maybe replace slip rings or something to make the communications work right. It's amazing to think that there are these big Profibus remote I/O modules up in the top of that thing, whirling around fast, right? That the electronics actually move inside of the head of this thing at a very high speed. And so, of course, you have to communicate with them and somehow.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that when you don't know, like we didn't know before, it was hard to find. We didn't know even where to look for the module or where to look for the fault. You would just say Profibus fault, and then that's, you know, let's see who we call now.
That's right. So, and Seidel is, they're a little bit protective of all their stuff. They'd kind of like to send their technicians out to help you instead of you doing your own work, right?
For sure, yeah. It's either the programmers are protected, or when they send somebody, they don't let you look at what they're doing. So it's all secretive, which is, you know, a little understandable, of course, because it's Seidel. But still, it's you don't want to feel like you're tied to anyone, and that's, you know, one of the reasons why we started looking for for Excitedel people to try to come here, which, you know, they usually have their software, their connection, and they give you better options. So now we have at least the PLC, you know, that we commented some of the PLC. We have a better idea, and we know more about the machine, so we're not scared. Before I wouldn't dare before to do a download anywhere. I wouldn't dare, even if I had a copy, I just didn't know. So it's experience.
I'm hesitant about that too. That's such a big, complicated machine, and when you do a download, you kind of think, well, what if? You know, what if something gets wrecked? And it's always to be best to be cautious when dealing with any of this stuff.
Like you said, it's always good to know that you can go back.
That's right. Make everything reversible. So this latest job that we just did, and I still have one more thing that I'm going to do on it. Where is that? Let's see if I got a picture of it again. I have so many things open on this desktop, you'd be shocked. There we go. That one. So this guy, the last thing that we have to do, it got powered down and it lost its encoder positions. It actually was interesting because it basically rehomed automatically, and we spent a lot of time trying to manually rehome it, and it was not consistent. We would tell it reset to 0 and it wouldn't reset, right? But then we powered it down one time, and at some point in that process, one of the encoders reset to 0, and we don't know why, right? There was no flag telling it to reset to 0, but it did it. So we know it can be done. So what I'm going to do next, it's kind of an interesting thing. I think I wrote at the end of this little write-up, I said, I actually captured, just as part of the debug process, and this is always a good idea. Can't really see this. Let's see if I can zoom in on it. You zoom. We'll go 200%. And you'll see a little bit of the code here. But what I actually do is I write the current count into some general machine positions and I save them. So this is automatic. Anytime this axis moves up to the top, it automatically moves this position. And I looked at it yesterday when we had the problem we had, and it had moved the position in there. It had saved the position at the top and at the bottom. So what I'm going to do, little task this afternoon, is I'm going to go in there and move that position into this position, the offset position, which is kind of, and what that's going to effectively do, there was a guy that was on one of the forums. I don't know if the rest of you guys use any of these forums, but there's like PLC Talk and PLC Dev and PLCS.com and whatever. And you'll find some pretty sharp guys on there. So when you do searches for problems, you'll find people. And one of the guys said, I don't know why everybody homes these encoders anyway. He said, just throw an offset in there. Just wherever the value is, just add to it or subtract from it or whatever. And I don't usually do that. I like the fact that I can hardware reset something to 0. But he has a point. And in this case, since we're having so much trouble manually, resetting this thing to 0, and it accidentally does it, I'm just going to provide this offset and use whatever it is. So let's see where that is. I do some scaling in here right there. So you see this encoder 1 offset, and I can move the captured value into this. So this minus 30, for instance, is where we moved down to the bottom, and Juan Pablo said, put a little more offset in there, put a little more offset, and it made it actually line up with the in-feed. It was a little bit closer to level. It was a little high, I think, or something like that. And then also it made it line up a little bit differently with the axis it was moving up to meet. So this was the little write-up, and I thought about this. I just normalize and scale, right, to whatever the readings are on these pulse counters. So this should be a very quick change. And the nice thing is we've gone back to the original pulse counters, which work, and I can just fudge this and watch it and see if the numbers are right. And I think they will be. So they'll change on the fly. Every time it goes up, it'll write a new offset, and it doesn't care about 0 anymore. It'll just take whatever it grabs at the top and whatever it grabs at the bottom. And if the numbers change, then that's what we'll use. So one of the fun things about this, like I said, I've been coming here for about 6 years now, and this is like a giant playground. There are, let's see, GE PLCs here, which I haven't messed with. We got a guy, Hector, that's a professional at that, so we leave that to him. But lots of Siemens, right? Siemens 400, Siemens 300s, Allen Bradley. We originally had a Slick 505. That syrup room was a 505 when we started, and when we added the tanks, we slowly migrated it. First, we put a Compact Logix in there, which is the newer, right, RS Logix 5000, and all we did with it was gather Ethernet IP, because I warned Juan Pablo early on, get away from DeviceNet if you can, right? DeviceNet was one of Allen Bradley's kind of worst ideas. It used to be necessary, but now everything's Ethernet IP. So if you have a choice, use Ethernet IP. It's regular Ethernet, right? You just use regular Ethernet cables. You don't have to have special software. So we migrated, putting all the new nodes on Ethernet IP. And then somewhere in that period of time, Juan Pablo went ahead and swapped the entire processor. And now it's running a L63, which is the 5000. Now, when you use the 60 series, you have to use the old software. So it's like a version 19. The newest you can get is version 19 or 20, and they're on like version 32 now. You know, Allen Bradley likes to change their versions, and they went to the RS Logix 5000 Studio, and everybody's going with the latest and greatest. But of course, they charge you $15,000 for a processor when you go to the L80s. We don't want to do that. So we're going to use the old stuff, right, as much as possible.
As long as it works, and we can run the whole plan probably with an L63 anyway if we wanted to. So
that's right. An L63, I did an $8 million machine in 2007 with an L63. It was a giant. As a matter of fact, it made respirator filters of all things, and that was back. It was after 9/11. It was because all the guys who ran into the 9/11 stuff and they had to breathe all that nasty stuff, 3M started getting a lot more orders for respirators. And so that was a huge machine. And the L63 ran everything. It ran 8 testers, 2 robots, you know, vibratory bowls feeding the filters in, all kinds of things. Big machine. So yeah, I don't know if it could run this whole plant. You might have a hard time running the blower.
Well, not the blower. The blower is it's a different alien. You know, it's a different. But anything else, I think it could run it. Just the blower has too much code on it.
Yeah, but you have, let's see, you have 4 palletizers here. You have 4 fillers. And the fillers are. It seems like most of the control is actually mechanical on a lot of those, right? There's not a lot of control.
It is mechanical, and if you think about it, the GE that it has is the 9030 and the code on that machine is probably from 1990, around that time. So it's not that of a big machine. The new machine that we have, the A3 Flex, has, you know, the new GE, and also has the connection through Ethernet to switch a little to Allen Bradley, but everything else, it's like you said, it's mechanical. Yeah. The only machine that we have servo is the new one. Everything else is mechanical, which is good when you have mechanics and not programmers.
Yeah, I don't have any pictures of the fillers. They're in this room here, and I do have pictures of them somewhere, but I didn't have a lot of time to put all this together today. But there's a lot of little standalone, you know, controllers and PLCs. You can see there's an Allen Bradley touchscreen all over this thing. And you're right. You could probably take a L63 and run certainly half the plant. And they say, I think the L85s, I think you could take an L85 and probably could run the whole plant. Okay. You'd pay $18,000 for the processor. And boy, if it ever went down, you'd be really down.
You're out. And you cannot have like we do now. We have an spare L63 for everything. Oh,
that's true. So yeah, it's a lot of fun here, but it's like a big playground to a degree. Another one that we've been working on for years now is this guy. So this is, this has quite a story behind it. This is actually an old Siemens computer-based. It's not even really a PLC. It's a computer running PLC program, but most of the code is in 3 servos, and they're Leroy Summers servos, which were not recently, but they were bought by Control Techniques. And most of the movement, I think back in the 80s or 90s, they would coordinate the servos by having the servo drives talk to each other. And so originally we were going to replace this with a Siemens S7300 and let this S7300 do the motion control. And then we kind of decided, well, let's try to make this Allen Bradley, and let's put some Allen Bradley Ultra drives or Kinetics drives on it. But the problem, as far as I see it, is this. I think we could probably do it, but here's the risk. You have 3 motors. They have to be coordinated, and the Allen Bradley servo motors do not fit where the original Leroy Summers. So when I talked about being able to reverse things, somehow you have to be able to take the old motors off, right? Put the new motors on and still be able to go back to the old motors. So we've talked about couplings. There's a lot of mechanical issues with it, in other words. So the way normally you would do this in integration, I kind of wish Seben was here. Seben is a guy who's asked me a lot of questions about integration. He thinks that the Automation Academy should focus more on integration than PLC programming, and I tend to agree with him, right? And so the lesson here would be, if you want to make this reversible, you have to have the old control system and the new control system set up side by side, both powered up. You have to have the old motors and the new motors and easily be able to switch from one set of motors to the other. So how do you do that when this old machine, all the motors are like down underneath the machine, right? They have, certain mounting holes on them, and they have different torques, and they have different whatever. So the idea would be, we would unbolt the old motors, put the new ones on there, do all our testing, and then when they want to be able to go back into production, which maybe a week later, 2 weeks later, if we're not done, you better be able to go back. Because this, if I point to it on the whole line, is right here. So what you can see is, if you're using that blower and you're running any of this water, it all comes through here. There's no way to get it to this palletizer without running through that machine. So that's the one that's been lingering. We've been working on that now for, I think, 2 years.
Yeah, the problem is that we haven't been able to work constantly because of that. I mean, we cannot, we need to find a way that we can stop. Either we stop selling, which is not an option, or we can do, switch back, like you said. And it's a matter of getting everything out, making a coupling, buying the servos from Allen Bradley. That now we have at least we have a match for the servos from Allen Bradley to the SCW that we have. So yeah. We cannot even use that. But once I'll probably send you a panel with everything to your office so you can test it over there. So, but you need
That's
for ready.
Yeah. Set up the Allen Bradley, run the 3 drives, and just run the motors drive, right? And say, well, they work together. We have this funny profile thing that it has to run, and it's not really all that complicated. It's kind of like there's a master encoder, and the other motors just follow that encoder. But you have to be able to bench test this thing, right, without it running on this. Meanwhile, and this is the funny thing about integration, there are those 2 big circular conveyors. I'm going to put those in here. I just sized a motor for a pump that goes, let's see, here.
Right there, yes.
Here. Actually, it's somewhere in here. Yeah, in between these 2 tanks. So we're going to put it actually has a big servo pump that goes in here. At the same time, we're dealing with this, which is why I came, right, for this thing here. And we're gathering all the OEE data and everything from here. So we're doing all these projects at once. And I'm sure, Juan Pablo, you're doing other projects here too. As a matter of fact, I know Joandro is working on some stuff in a room here.
Getting all the information from the auxiliary equipment, which is as important as everything. And I'm trying to get the information from the power analyzer, the electrical power analyzer. So
that's Modbus, and
which is Modbus, and I had no idea how it works. So learning a little there also. So
So we're kind of toward the end of our time here, but this is an example. Juan Pablo is the, I don't know what your title is here, but you're one of the owners of the plant, but yet what do we talk about all the time? It doesn't have a lot to do with necessarily production or shipping or business things. It's this fun gadget-based stuff, right?
Well, I've been lucky enough that, years ago I was only able to do, I don't know, shipping and receiving and buying supplies, talking with vendors, and it's we grew enough so that I can put somebody else to do that, and I can do something that I found interesting, and it's absolutely necessary. It's not just interesting, but it's absolutely. I mean, the plant, as you know, when you came here, we had no information. Now we have switched a lot from paper to a lot of digitals, and if I hadn't do it, either you pay people a lot of money to do things that, as I am, I think as I have like a OCD, I'm never happy with the results except with yours. But it's who I am, and I like to do things my way. And the only way to do it, I think, is learn it, and it's not that hard. It's like I don't know if you told me, but or it was Mike. It's another language. It's just learning another language. It's not a new science. It's not you don't need to be a genius. It's just doing the code, reading, writing notes, comments, and that's basically it. It's not as easy as it sounds, but it's not as complicated either.
I've said in the past, it's like eating an elephant. You eat one little bite at a time, right? But in this case, I think sometimes we're eating 5 bites at a time.
And that's my problem, but but I can't help it. So
yeah. So any comments from anybody else, Carlos or?
Yeah, I'm with him. I'm with Juan. Says most of the time it's like vendors try to make things look very complicated. So you would have to go with them every time. But for me, it's like we're human beings, and there is few people that maybe have problems or something. This happen. Everyone have something, but we can learn everything. We just say you have to take the manuals, read, practice, and we do it and do it and do it again. You will just learn. Then will be like, what's that? So there will not be a problem. So, yeah. But the most important thing is that you want to do it. If you want to do it, you can learn it, whatever. Yeah. It's like the people when you born or something, when you born, it's empty. Yeah. You have to learn everything, in the life. So, but the most important thing is the attitude and that you want to do it. If you want to do it, you will learn. And the same happened to me. I learned a lot of things just reading manuals and because I want to do stuff and move forward. And the good example is in Juan, like he said, is that he had this big playground. So this is nice.
That's right. So Carlos owns a company called Vanguard Vision in Tampa, and he does serialization via, vision systems, cameras, but it's, he's moving into maybe doing other vision jobs. And we've been talking a little bit offline on LinkedIn and communications about Cognix, right? So like anything else, right? And Juan Pablo and I have been talking about using Cognix for some of his cap identification and monitoring the bottles as they move through to make sure that all of them are there and that they're in the right shape. Because those big spiral conveyors, if those cases go up to the top of the spiral and get stuck because they're fat and they're out of shape, you're going to have some big disasters. That's going to be 20, 30 feet in the air, and it's really hard to get them down. So we've been talking about using Cognix, and I've got 3 Cognix cameras back at my shop, but no time to do anything with them. I used to do machine vision in the 1990s. I did tons of it. But making time to sit down and get back into it, other than just putting something under the camera and looking at it, it's really hard to find time to learn the new stuff. So Carlos and I talked a little bit about, what camera should he get to move into some of the deep learning techniques that Cognix has right now. And you know, once you start devoting your time to that, well, you're either leaving your other business behind, or you have to have an end goal in mind. So for instance, with Juan Pablo, we have the cases in the shrink wrapper, and we need to look at those cases at some point, and all of a sudden that'll light a fire under getting a camera and putting those underneath and recognizing the colors and counting them and all that kind of stuff. And it'll get me maybe back into the machine vision part. And Carlos, I think you're learning some of that new stuff, maybe wanting to move into that field a little bit. So anyway, well,
yeah, of course.
This has been great. Great to see you again. Join up with us, Jet. I probably know you from LinkedIn or something. I recognize the name.
He was with me. He was with me in a lunch with you.
Oh.
I just going enter to the meeting because Carlos sent me the link because this is not my
the Figueroa, but I didn't recognize your first name.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had lunch on the way down.
I am. It's not part of my expertise, but I would love to learn about the other stuff. But let me give you an introduction. I am the own company from Capanic. Capanic basically their expertise is for reliability engineering, and Capanic have a certification from PMP myself. CMRP, and right now, 2 months ago, I am certified to assess management assessor, and I would love to share my information because I can help something with the people. I love to help the company.
Yeah. So reliability engineering. Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll definitely talk more about that. You know, Carlos and I have been talking about with another guy, Zach Scribner and Walker Reynolds, which I think I told Juan Pablo about. He's a OEE guy and has some software that is involved with all this plant data information, but sharing information, right, and networking is very important. So
yes.
Yeah. So we'll be moving to that.
I was listening a podcast yesterday, a webinar that he did, and it's the same. The major thing was like Juan Pablo is mentioning that Juan Gavin that most of these people just charge crazy money for the implementation and these things and the focus that they are trying to do is charge fair, you know. Right. Don't just assault the client. Charge fair and how he pulls, because it looks like you're doing like digital transformation. So in your own way by yourself, but this is what you're doing in there. So you're moving from paper to digital. So this is great. And having the chance to do it by yourself, you're not being assaulted for this big integration company that are just charging 3 times what's supposed to be.
Right. So Walker talked about unified namespace, and Juan Pablo and I have talked about this a little bit. It's hard to tell exactly what it is that he does, but by accident anyway, Juan Pablo basically has a unified namespace it's one big SQL database. Everything goes to that. So all the data is accessible from there. But rather than going to a Walker Reynolds and saying, okay, implement your project, you know, which could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, I don't know. And Juan Pablo is looking at another company that does OEE. And so we want to find out more about it. Does it cost X amount per machine, or is it X amount for the entire plant and you can just reuse the modules? And what all does it cover? Is it MES? Is it ERP? You know, so identifying all that and figuring out what to use. But meanwhile, what I think is cool about what Juan Pablo does is he invents this as it goes along. He's brought his shipping into it, receiving, work orders, batching, everything has made its way into Ignition. And it is what it is. It's become pretty modular, but it does the job. But it's taken years, and this is it's taken, typical.
In that part, I can help a lot with Carlos. Carlos and myself doing a basically partnership to try to get more networking. But this is my area. My area is regarding the maintenance, because normally the people. Let me give you an example. Normally, when the client told me, I wanted to do RCM, sorry, the Reliability Center Maintenance. But because this is a name that was marketing, but before that, you need to do a lot of methodology before to know which one equipment is necessary to do RCM, because the RCM is a little bit expensive because you need to invest in a methodology that is a very robust process. But I love it to share information. I will share information to Juan Pablo, is the name.
Yes.
And you,
Okay.
that you know a little bit more in detail how we can help the company. It's not money. It's not money, because normally in the maintenance area, the personal thinking about money, no, it's too expensive. But we need to change the main and thinking about how much money we putting in the trash waste. Because if we can take care of this money out, basically this is free, and you will get more money to invest, get all the assets. That is my part. Try to help the client to get this money from the trash can that you always putting in the trash can and putting to get money.
Yeah. Well, the nice thing is too, you guys are all in Florida and you can all speak Spanish to each other. So, and everybody's on LinkedIn. So
you can practice with us.
I'm the only one.
You won't learn, trust me. You won't learn.
But in any case, it is about 20 after 12 Eastern time, and I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. It's been great to talk to everybody. We're all on LinkedIn, so anybody who's not connected, we can forward some connection information. Carlos, did you ever connect to Joe?
Yes.
Okay, good. Good. So yeah, Juan Pablo met Joe at some point. Joe comes down here to Miami sometimes. We had lunch one time. Joe builds stone saws, and I think Carlos may help him down there with some a little bit of work. But guys are all.
Of course, all that we can, man. This is like we have to make it like fun, help all the people that you can. And
yep. Yeah. Well, and this is for the Automation Academy. And so I'm hoping as the Automation Academy grows, right, these webinars, my next webinar, actually, I'm going to be talking with Carlos sometime in January. And we're going to talk about what maybe even I tell you can bring the reliability into it. But I do want to know more about serialization. So we'll be talking about that. And hopefully that'll be probably in the first couple weeks of January. But Carlos and I are going to be together on that.
Of course, will be a pleasure. Yeah.
All right.
It will be a pleasure to me.
All right, Frank. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Thanks, Frank.
Thanks, Juan.
Yep. Great talking. And thank you very much, Juan Pablo.
No problem. Thank you. We'll see you. I'll see you soon.
Yes. We'll see. I hope so.
Yeah.
In a few minutes. No.
Yeah. All right.
See you. Bye. Take care.
Bye-bye.